Yo, yo, yo. Welcome to the Around the 412 Fantasy Football Show. As always, brought to you by Keats Barbershop, located in East Rochester, PA. As always, I am Smitty, and as always, with me is Joe. What's going on, Joe?
Hey, what's up, man? It's championship week. Let's make some money.
It is championship week. It's just the two of us this week, and people that are watching or listening to the show are going to quickly realize that. We don't have Drew with us. It is not my business to put that out there or divulge into the reason that he is not with us this week. We hope that he is back next week. And all I will say about the situation is if you are somebody that prays, please do so for him and Zaina, and they will be in our thoughts, and we hope that they're in everybody's thoughts. Without giving too much information, that's all I'll say about it. But we are very hopeful that he'll be back with us next week to kind of recap the season. And for those dynasty players, of course, start highlighting some rookies that you might want to tout or, guys that you should hang on to, maybe some sell high guys. We'll get into that stuff. But like you said, it's championship week. There's still going to be people playing for championships while I might not be one of them. Nope. Yeah. Oh, this week is semis for Chad.
Of course
don't love that. But there's some significant. So this is where immediately you guys are going to be missing Drew because we're going to talk about the injuries, of course, to kick off the show, and that is normally Drew's forte. But we're going to do the best to cover that. Some pretty significant ones that we're going to kick off with. Derrick Henry, like 20 minutes before we started the show, comes out that he's doubtful for tomorrow night's game. The Titans are basically treating Week 17 like a team that has everything locked up would in Week 18. Because their season is basically going to be defined by what they do in Week 18 against the Jaguars in a winner-take division game.
Yeah.
So you can see by their injury report and who's going to be inactive for them that's how they are treating it. But from a fantasy standpoint, to be in your championship or in Chad's case, the semifinals, if you have Derrick Henry on your roster, I mean, that is very unfortunate.
For sure. He's been a staple for people all year. He started a little bit slow. People are like, is the wheels finally falling off? And he's been fantastic. So it's a tough sled. Hopefully there's people on your waiver wire. But I mean, running back's been slim pickings all year. So like, I don't really know how you swing that.
Yeah, we were talking about, Hassan Haskins probably the leading candidate to lead the backfield and touches there for Tennessee. But I don't know that I wouldn't really feel comfortable about playing him. Somebody we're going to talk about when we get to Tinder, and I don't know that a guy like this is necessarily still out there, but for some reason, like say somebody hasn't grabbed Cam Akers or you were smart enough to do so after that performance right away. I mean, that's somebody that to me probably has RB2 upside this week. Scrolling across the bottom, you're going to see the RB rankings for this week. And while Derrick Henry might be in there, if I were redoing that, I would take him out, move everybody up a spot, and probably put Cam Akers in there at the back end. So he's somebody that I like as like an RB2 play this week. You're going to have to find, somebody somewhere. I don't know that Hassan Haskins is necessarily the answer there.
Well, it's crazy because Cam Akers coming into this season, he was like a 4th-round pick, completely just like huge bust candidate throughout the year. In the last 3 weeks, like he's exploded. He had 3 touchdowns in this most recent game. With all the injuries that they've had at the quarterback position, at the receiver position, they've really turned into a very run-heavy offense, and he's benefited heavily from it. I know early in the season, Drew was talking about he just doesn't look healthy when he's running the ball. He still lacks that explosiveness. Everybody was pointing to like, oh, look how different like an Achilles recovery for say like someone like James Robinson at the beginning of the year when he was thriving, where it was like Cam Akers, like he just didn't have that, but he's gotten increased workload these last couple of weeks and he's really turned it around. He's been a top 5 running back kind of out of nowhere, really.
Yeah. And good point by Chad here as well. Like if Dontrell Hilliard was healthy, I think that he might be a serviceable play this week. Should he have been the leading back for a week? But yeah, very unfortunate situation for Derrick Henry owners and the Titans. I mean, hopefully it is just a thing like they're looking at it, looking forward to Week 18, and Henry would have been able to go if this was like a must-win game for them. But pretty clear how they're treating this when you look at the rest of the injury report as well. Another scary one, and this is, just from like a real life perspective as well, like forget fantasy football for a second, forget football itself for a second. Tua Tagovailoa suffering a 3rd concussion this season. And now concussions, like Drew preaches this all the time, non-linear, not concussion doesn't equal concussion. Somebody could suffer a concussion. Somebody else could suffer a concussion. They don't necessarily all affect people the same way. You can wake up the next day and have no symptoms, but like with the way that we've seen to respond to them, with the ones that we've seen him suffer, the fight or flight response that we saw him midfield, with his fingers and stuff like that. Like this is obviously very concerning. It's a very scary situation for him. But to suffer 3 within, when would he even suffer that first one? I mean, we're talking about maybe like 3/4 of a season, not even the full season since he's had all 3. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to step back and say, like, even think about this from a football perspective, but we're not going to see him this week. Best guess, do you think that we see him even week 18?
I mean, the human side of me wants to think that they are going to play it safe. I know McDaniels, when asked about it this week, they've already ruled him out. Bridgewater's going to get the start, and they said that Tua needs to worry about his health first. Like, that was like the sound bite from Mike McDaniels. However, the Dolphins are very much in the playoff hunt. Losing that game this past week on Christmas Eve, that really puts them in a weird spot where they need to win some games in order to get into the playoffs. It's terrible to say, but I think that he will play week 18 if he's needed, and they will preach like he's healthy, whatever. But yeah, we'll see. To your point, week 4 he was stretchered off. That was the big one.
Week 4. Okay.
Yeah, so that was pretty high in the season. And then let's see, he had they haven't listed the second one that he had, but that was a little bit closer into the year. So he said
it was Buffalo, Cincinnati, and this one. So whatever games those were.
Yeah. But yeah, it's unfortunate to see. I mean, he's really kind of had like a coming out year, which if you think back to when he was in Alabama, it was like this guy, QB1, like for sure, like he comes out of nowhere, leads Alabama in the national championship game off the bench, kind of usurped Jalen Hurts out of his starting role. And now all of a sudden it's like, okay, like, was he a bust, this and that? Sure, getting Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle doesn't hurt. I think me and you could probably put up a couple hundred yards a game passing to those two guys, but they really catered the offense to his strengths, and he's only in year 3, and having this many concussions in 1 year, it's a huge concern for him moving forward. Hopefully he's able to kind of stay upright and stay away from that, but it's just really unfortunate for him. He's really had a tough string of injuries, really dating back to his last season at Alabama, between the hip, the concussions, all this different stuff. So,
yeah. And I think too, just from that standpoint of saying like being labeled a bust and stuff, I don't think it did him any favors that he was surrounded by Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert in that draft class either. I mean, he comes out pretty much any other year. I don't think he necessarily was labeled that as quickly as he was. Ben says he will not be seen again this season. I think they trust Teddy Bridgewater enough that they can let Tua play it safe and still possibly make a playoff run. Listen, I mean, I would love for that to be the organization's thought process, but like Joe, I don't think that it will be. But I mean, to be seen, we're playing a guessing game right now, which, when we're talking about somebody's health, is not the way to go. They're around him every day. They know what his response has been to these concussions. Hopefully they do play it safe with him, whatever that looks like. Chad said this does make Willis an even more appetizing DFS play. For me, though, I'd think I'd put him third behind Purdy and Goff for QB punt strategy. Willis, okay, listen, I'm not saying he can't get better. I actually really was on board with a Malik Willis in terms of if you're drafting a project guy, let him sit a year at least and learn in the NFL, and I wouldn't have hated it. Right now, though, from what I've seen, this is just as a passer because I completely get what he adds on the ground as well. He is the worst starting quarterback that I've ever seen as a passer. I am not even, that's not like hyperbole. I am being serious. As a passer, I think he's the worst starting quarterback that I've watched back on tape.
This is why I don't watch tape too much, because then I just get depressed.
Yeah, but I understand what he adds with his legs, so maybe there's obviously still going to be some fantasy relevancy there, and with no Derrick Henry, maybe that could even be more so. So I totally get it, but I will say I like Purdy and Goff both more for sure, because I have both those guys ranked within our top 15.
Yeah, Goff I have as a top 4 play this week. He has a really good matchup. I lost in one of our dynasty leagues because I benched Goff with the matchup against Carolina, and he still balled out. Home game for them, last home game of the year. They've been really good on home territory. So I think Goff's a great play. Purdy, I just saw a stat today that said that he has the same amount of 25-yard completions, I think, for touchdowns as Patrick Mahomes.
Oh man, what a story this is in San Fran. Yeah,
it's unbelievable.
I mean,
I'm pretty sure that anybody that they have, Shanahan, can turn them into a workable quarterback.
Yeah, it sucks because I by no means do I want to take anything away from what Brock Purdy is doing, but I think that it's more of an indictment of Kyle Shanahan and that staff, his offensive system, than it is the player Brock Purdy himself. But all definitely have to tip the cap to what he's done there, because I don't think necessarily like he can make it work with anybody. Like, I mean, even TBD, we'll see about even Trey Lance, but with what he's getting out of Brock Purdy, just insane cap tip.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Yeah. Like, give him a lifetime contract. Like,
Jared said, how confident are we about Tyler Lockett playing this week?
It's crazy. He had surgery a week ago on a broken finger. Mm-hmm. He was back today in practice, catching passes, throwing the ball around. Like, I swear that like football players are not made of the same material that like us normal humans are. So it looks like he said that there was no pain, like there's like no symptoms of him even having this injury, and it's a must-win game for them. So I think he is going to play. Obviously, they have a tough matchup against the Jets. Looking at the Jets stats in the last 3 weeks against wide receivers, they've been a pretty tough matchup. So they've only given up 20.3 points per game. So I would probably lean towards trying to find other options this week against the Jets. I don't know if you know how they utilize the players at all, but from what I've seen in the Jets this year, Sauce Gardner is not like the shadow type of guy. Well, he stays on the left side of the field.
Yeah.
So
DJ Reed, the other corner, graded out as the best corner in football last season when he was with Seattle. So
yeah, so him and Reed, they're just like, we're cool with these guys. They play on the side of the field they're going to be on. Mm-hmm. I feel very nervous about Metcalf and Lockett. I think with Lockett, especially, you kind of have the dump off kind of upside in a PPR format, whereas DK, like he gets the targets, but more like your big play guy. But yeah, I mean, I would probably be leaning other options if you can. I wouldn't start someone off like waivers for one of those two guys, but if you're in the championship, you probably have some good pieces. So I don't think that they're a lock for my lineup. It just really depends on what you have available to you.
Yeah, I ranked Metcalf this week. I did not rank Lockett for the reason you're saying. I think they have been as good as they've been. They've been susceptible to the every now and then big play. And I think if there's a guy that's going to make that in Seattle, it's going to be DK Metcalf. So I tend to lean like him if you are going to have to play one of those two.
Yeah.
I don't like Tyler Lockett this week. I mean, finger issue obviously plays into that. I'm surprised he's even playing. We talked about it last week, like thinking, man, with what that is, I don't know that he's going to play again in the regular season. Maybe they make the postseason, he can come back. But yeah, it sounds like he's going to be out there. So
it's ridiculous. Like I thought for sure he was done for the season. Like you just think like, all right, your job is to catch like a fast moving object with a hand, and that hand has broken elements to it. So naturally you can't do things. They're like, no, you're fine.
Another quarterback that I wanted to talk about that we've already seen miss a few weeks here is Lamar Jackson. So he didn't practice again today. It is Wednesday, but so I always bring that up just for the reason if guys are going to miss a day of practice, it's typically on a Wednesday, but with him, he's obviously already missed multiple games now in a row with that knee issue. Harbaugh's been very like low key about what's going on.
Yeah. He's been very tight-lipped about it for sure.
In his press conference, he's given like paragraph long answers to every other question. And then when asked about Lamar, we expect him back this year. So who knows what that situation is there? But I mean, in short, I'll just ask bluntly, do you expect to see him on Sunday night?
No. And I don't know if I'd feel good about him playing, even if he was there. I just think the Steelers play him well, coming off like with all of that rust. Like it's going to be a low scoring 3-point game, and somebody will kick a last minute field goal to win it. Who knows which of the two it'll be. I would keep Lamar Jackson on the bench, even if he did somehow magically get there. They've essentially already clinched a playoff berth, so it doesn't seem like it's necessary for them to do it. Even though the Steelers got flexed into the Sunday night game, I don't think that changes anything. I don't think he plays.
Yeah, I mean, they're still, I guess, in play for the division with Cincinnati, but like they would know about that prior to game time because if Cincinnati were to beat Buffalo, then that's really a non-factor for Baltimore. But yeah, I don't think that he ends up playing either. I think that we see the same quarterback matchup that we went into the last game with the Ravens, even though neither quarterback ended up finishing that game. So hopefully, we do see both Pickett and Huntley, and both guys are able to finish this time. Chad, going back to the Purdy thing, just said, I'm just gonna put him on the screen. Why am I not doing that? I'm not so sure it's all Shanahan because Purdy has consistently thrown darts with confidence, and if he went undrafted, he'd probably get more respect than he gets as Mr. Relevant, and Iowa State stats back it. I mean, for sure. That's why I say, like, definitely got to tip your cap to what he's doing as well. I'm just saying, if there's one situation that I could drop any quarterback into, it is with Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco, especially for a guy just starting his career. I mean, this has been a great spot for Brock Purdy to come into. He's taken it and run with it, absolutely. But I'm just saying, I think that the situation that he's been thrust into really couldn't have been better with the offensive staff that he has. And, but he's making it work, like, even without Deebo Samuel. Like, he's rejuvenated Kittle, who had a little bit of a lull in his receiving work for a period of time this season as well. So I definitely got to tip your cap to what Brock Purdy's doing as well.
Saving my belly button. Love it.
So obviously we're not through with the injuries yet, but was one of the headlines going to be about Derek Carr being benched at all? Because I don't want to talk about these next comments from Chad.
I was going to hold off and talk about that there.
Okay.
It's not really injury related. So yeah, I was going to bring that up then.
All right. So we'll just skip past that for now. A couple other injuries to highlight. Jalen Hurts, I guess we could talk about real quick, just because I think when I started doing my rankings yesterday, Nick Sirianni had me in a blender with his comments.
Facts.
But it looked pretty clear like we're going to see another week of Gardner Minshew. There's even some speculation. It's been on both sides of the speculation, like Sirianni throwing out, we'll leave the window open. Jalen could play this week. And then, people saying they're not so sure they're going to get him back even, for the playoffs. Like it's just all over the map in terms of where Jalen is at right now. So obviously with that shoulder injury, we don't know the severity of it. Like Drew speculated, it could be like an AC sprain. So who knows? But point being here, don't expect to have him again. And that's another guy, like you probably were able to ride him pretty far into your fantasy season. And now to not have him through the playoffs, that's pretty tough.
Yeah, it's definitely unfortunate. And Gardner Minshew, like, he actually played really well in that game. I know he had a couple of picks, but I didn't feel like they were like grossly negligent, like passes, like kind of just like unfortunate plays. For someone that was like living in a van, like in the off season, like not.
I think
bad,
that's just
honestly.
my choice, though.
Fair, that's fair.
Like he would be doing that. He could get like $100 million contract somewhere next year, and it's not going to change his lifestyle at all.
Yeah, he might just leave the ignition turned so he can get a little bit of heat from every now and then.
Yeah. Now these ones I don't think are necessarily as significant. I think that these guys are going to go. Just wanted to mention Tony Pollard dealing with a thigh injury. I didn't necessarily. I think I still had him ranked relatively like where I have been the last few weeks. But does him dealing with a little bit of a thigh injury, like would that bump up where you have a player like Zeke ranked?
I think it's one of those things where you have to like keep an eye on how practice goes. I actually don't know if he's going to play this week. I think it's more serious than they let on. I didn't rank him for that reason. And if they have a pretty tough matchup on paper this week against San Francisco. But if Pollard is out, like Zeke is a must start. Like the volume that they give to their running backs is unbelievable. And it's really just those two. If one goes down, the other one just picks up the slack. So on a volume basis alone, if Pollard's going to be out, Zeke is a must play regardless of matchup. I think if Pollard can go, and I would be surprised if he didn't, because with Hurts being out, they very much still have a shot at that division. And so, or no, they play the Titans this week.
Why do they're on Thursday. Like they play tomorrow. So
I don't think he's going to play.
But here's the thing. Should we read into his own tweet? Because he tweeted 50 minutes ago, another week, another game, another chance to rush for some yards for St. Jude. I'm donating $15 every yard to help raise funds for their great mission.
So what I'm hearing is that Pollard hates St. Jude.
So I don't know if we should read into that at all, because he hasn't practiced this week, but
yeah,
I also completely forgot that that's who the Titans play tomorrow. So I'm thinking like, oh, he can still get in like limited practices, Thursday and Friday or something, but that's
because he didn't practice yesterday. He didn't practice the day before. I don't know if they did anything today. I haven't seen anything.
No, we cannot have so he's going to travel with the team and go through pregame warm-ups, and then a decision will be made. That can't happen. The worst case scenario for fantasy.
Yeah,
worst case scenario. The other one, like I was gonna allude to, another running back was Aaron Jones dealing with a little bit of an ankle issue. It looked like it rolled up on him. He still played, but obviously, like, and who knows how much that's impacting the running back workloads, because we've seen like they'll just give AJ Dillon like 3 straight series at a time anyway, and then we'll see like AJ Dillon get 2 on his own. Like, I don't know what the rhyme or reason is with LaFleur's variance with the running back usage. But I mean, is this something, like, again, going back to what I asked you with Pollard and Zeke, like, would you maybe bump up Dillon because of this, or where are you with Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon?
Yeah, I mean, he did practice on Wednesday, so he practiced today. So that's like a really good sign, because they weren't sure if he would. They said that he tweaked the ankle initially in practice, and then he retweaked it during the game. AJ Dillon outsnapped him 38-25, and Patrick Taylor, their third string guy, even got some snaps in the game last week. So I think that Aaron Jones is going to be a full go. The Cowboys, the Broncos. What am I doing? The Green Bay Packers are bought like a buzzsaw in December. Like, Matt LaFleur has never lost a game in December.
Right.
It's insane. And I think that they're going to go as far as their running backs take them. Aaron Rodgers, like, I thought was really going to have a big week last week, and he was fine, but he didn't do anything magical. They're really running on the shoulders of these two guys. So I think that he'll probably get more work knowing that he's practicing. I think if he wasn't practicing through today, wasn't practicing tomorrow, then I'd be more concerned. But this is basically an elimination game for him. I would say that he's their best player. So they're going to do everything they can to get him ready to go. So if he wasn't practicing, yeah, I'd be bumping up Dillon a little bit, but I think Aaron Jones could be in for a big day.
Right. And then the last one I have is actually a player potentially coming back from injury, Deebo Samuel, who had suffered that MCL sprain, and people were like, well, that's it, probably done for, at least the fantasy playoffs. I guess, like, he could theoretically have returned from the original timeline in week 18, but they were like, there's no chance of him coming back during the fantasy football season, or at least when most people have their fantasy football championships, not named Chad. But Deebo Samuel coming back. Hey, we were just talking about Brock Purdy, getting another weapon for him in that offense. If Deebo Samuel's able to go, do you think we see Deebo Samuel play?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's possible they're leaving the light on for him. He's one of those guys, like, he's been in the league long enough that, like, if he doesn't necessarily practice, they'll give him kind of the go. Personally, for me, he's not going to be in fantasy lineups if I have him on a championship roster this week, just because he hasn't really had that signature Deebo performance that we've seen in years past. A lot of weapons, a lot of mouths to feed. Christian McCaffrey has become like the primary, I don't know, ball handler in that offense. I don't know what you want to call it, but he's the main target. He's the player that they're designing the game plan around, which used to be Deebo. He's been sitting in that wide receiver 20 to 24 range. And like, I don't see his first game off injury really having that upside there. So to me, it's going to be like one of those, hey, like, thanks for getting me there. Ride the bench. Thank you for your contributions on the season. Yeah, even if he's playing, I don't think that I feel too good about him. I didn't rank him in the top 30 this week. I think that if he does come back, it's going to be in a limited capacity.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it pretty much week in and week out, the lack of top 20 finishes that he's had this season within that offense. So I don't think that changes with him coming back from injury. Chad mentioned also something to monitor is James Conner dealing with an illness, DNP, on Wednesday. Now, it is just an illness, but at the same time, like, we don't know what type of illness, obviously. And also they have multiple people, him and AJ Green, both missed with an illness. So if there's like a stomach bug or something going around in there, like, could we maybe not see, because it's a meaningless game for Arizona. They're not playing for anything at this point. What a disaster of a season it's been there for a team with relatively high expectations going into the year. So yeah, I mean, that is something to monitor, but that again would be a pretty big loss. I don't know where you have him ranked. I think he came in right around like 10 or 11 for me.
Yeah, I've been ranking him pretty high just because he gets so much volume, and especially with like the backup quarterback situation they have now, it's like they're going to be leaning on the run a lot more. So I just really like the volume that James Conner has. He's been finding his way into the end zone really for 2 years now. So I don't think that like this news is necessarily going to deter me from anything. This week I had Conner at 11, you had him at 10. So I think we're pretty much on the same page there.
Also with quarterback situation though, it does look like Colt McCoy, who practiced in full, would be back. A little bit of an upgrade from a passing standpoint over Trace McSorley. So
man,
you obviously lose the legs a little bit with McSorley's mobility, but I mean, yeah, that was that game versus Tampa, neither team deserved to win that game really, but it was tough to watch.
There's probably some people that lost their matchup because DeAndre Hopkins went 1 reception for 4 yards on 10 targets. That's insane.
That's one of the least efficient performances I've ever seen in my life.
Ever. Like Greg Dortch went 10 for 98 on 11 targets.
Mm-hmm.
So respect Greg Dortch always, but
also, Chad just mentioned Chris Olave, who I didn't have in here, but yeah, he got in a limited practice on Wednesday. What is your confidence level playing him in like a must-win game for the Saints? Plus, they need help, obviously. But
yeah, I mean, they have a really good matchup on paper this week. They have, let me see here. So Philly has been pretty porous on the receiving end of things. So they're giving up 30 points per game to quarterbacks, 38.8 to receivers. So I think that it's a solid matchup. I could see him as a flex play. Raheem Shaheed has been kind of like the primary receiver out of nowhere for them. And I feel like that's the song and dance that we've been saying about the Saints for a couple of years now. It's like they find these random guys to pop off for like a few weeks, and then it's kind of like they find the next one. They find the next one. They just can't find anybody to really be the guy since Michael Thomas has been banged up. I think the key is just being able to keep Dalton on his feet. The offense has just been disappointing as a whole, and they're not getting a lot of points. Like they're moving the ball well, but they're not really doing a lot with it. So I put him in that like low end wide receiver 2, definitely a flex option. But I don't think that he's a top play for the week by any means.
Shaheed averaging a cool 19.7 yards per reception right now. So
ridiculous. Out of nowhere.
All right. Well, what other headlines do we got that maybe weren't injury related? I alluded to one of them already. So
yeah, so Derek Carr, obviously riding the pine pony now. So I don't know if it's injury-related, performance-related, but a guy that just had 5,000 yards last season getting replaced for Jared Stidham. We've seen what he's done in New England. Wasn't anything impressive. I don't see how this makes them better for the now, better for the future. I don't think he's going to all of a sudden turn it around. He obviously has the familiarity with the offense because he has that history with the head coach. But honestly, I hate the move. I think at least from what we've seen from Derek Carr throughout the season, you can tell that dude really cares about this team. He's a great leader. And just from a mental health perspective of the game, like I think he really is like one of the best players in the league at just being like, all right, like here's how things are going. I'm gonna be open about how I'm feeling about things and just kind of like speaking to that. So just to turn around and just kind of like spit in his face at the end of the season, to me, it just doesn't make any sense. Didn't understand the hire at all for Vegas, and it's obvious why they've kind of like blown up in their face about it. So I hate it. I think this impacts Devontae Adams a lot. I think this is an uptick for Josh Jacobs. They're going to be leaning on the run a little bit more. But yeah, I don't know. It's weird.
This is obviously, with them being out of it now, the Raiders being out of it could help them from a draft position, but also if Carr were to get hurt, his $40 million would become guaranteed next season. They obviously don't want that to happen. They're probably going to move on. So from that standpoint, whatever. But again, for somebody that has given the organization as much as he has, while they haven't had necessarily the results, he hasn't been the reason why. They've never been a top 20 team on the defensive side of the football. They're 32nd, actually, since he's gotten there.
Yeah.
In 2000. What year did he become the starter there? 2014 he was drafted or something like that? 2014 or 15?
Let me see.
I was just looking at this literally.
I don't know why I typed it in.
Dan Orlovsky's a big Derek Carr advocate, so I was looking at what he was putting out today.
Yeah, well, we've talked about it today, and it's like Derek Carr, like I don't think he was ever going to be like the top 5 in the league kind of guy. I think at his peak, he can fit into that like 6 to 10 range. But he's been in Oakland since 2014.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's done his time. I mean, they've obviously had some good years with him where he's made the Pro Bowl. Was an MVP, like 3rd place.
2016. That was the year he broke his leg before the playoffs. Right. But that year, yeah, he was balling.
Yeah, so it's just like the dude's obviously done well. 4,800 yards last year. It's like and it's not like he had like a crazy touchdown percentage or anything like that. Like, I don't know. I feel like he could be like a Kirk Cousins and like go to another team and like really do well. It'll be interesting to see.
Chad's saying the Bucks.
The Bucks, yeah. I don't know.
I think Colts, like, obviously, I think everybody's going to say Colts that just jump off the map. Like, you think about a team whose roster you feel like, for the most part, is kind of in place, but they don't have, like, the draft capital necessarily. Like, I don't know, people are throwing the Panthers out there as well. I think the Panthers want to finally go the draft route, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Real quick, I do want to answer this one. Greg Dortch or Romeo Dobbs off of waivers?
Ooh, I think that the Dobbs thing is going to be a one-hit wonder. I don't like their matchup against Atlanta. They've been really locked down against the passing game, only allowing 18.6 points per game in the last 3 weeks. Minnesota is absolutely porous in all facets of defense. So Dobbs obviously has a little bit more competition, being that you have Watson and Alan Lazard there. I think that Green Bay and Minnesota are looking like a shootout potential kind of game, despite the fact that Green Bay's defense has really shored up in the last couple of weeks. They gave up some big plays against Miami, but overall been really good. But Minnesota can score. They can get scored on. So if I'm choosing between the two, definitely give me Dobbs. He kind of has a little bit more rapport with Rodgers, and then going back to Colt McCoy starting in place of McSorley. Maybe if it was the same QB going in week to week, I could see it. But I don't think that that's going to be – I think you're chasing points if you're going after Greg Dortch this week.
Yeah, I'm in full agreement. I mean, I would rather have a guy that's like, third or so on the pecking order for touches, well, in the passing game in Romeo Dobbs than Dortch, who's like the second or third option with Colt McCoy as the quarterback. So,
yeah.
Hey, Wallace, come on. We're saying Romeo Dobbs. That's the answer. At least spell Greg Dortch's name right if you're going to play him.
Respect Greg Dortch.
Yeah.
All right, so staying within the division, we had a coach who get fired this week, Nathaniel Hackett. I think it's pretty impressive to be able to get fired in your first year as a head coach, but the Broncos have been absolutely horrendous. They've obviously dealt with a slew of injuries, losing Javonte Williams. Both of their star receivers have been hurt in different times throughout the year. Russell Wilson, ego, everything else. So we'll see where this lands. Yeah. So do you think that has any impact in the last couple of weeks? Do you think Russ is going to finally be able to cook? Where do you feel like, do you have any confidence at all in Denver now that he's been fired?
His cooking, he cooked the turkey from Christmas Vacation. That's Russ cooking.
Oh man. What about the 3 touchdowns that he had 2 weeks ago?
Broken clock is right twice a day. Listen, I've been, you can attest to this. I have been out on Russ before this season.
That's true.
Now, yeah. I didn't expect it would be as bad as it has been there, but I have been out on Russ for some time. I don't think that a coaching change, whoever it's going to be, the interim guy is the guy that was brought in like week 2 to help with like game management decisions, and stuff like that by Hackett. So I think that their next, first off, it's not a desirable place for the next head coach. You go into a situation without like the draft capital for the next couple of years that Denver doesn't have. But I think that that's going to be pivotal to get whatever is left out of Russ the most that you can. But for the rest of it, no, absolutely not. The next couple of weeks.
Yeah. It's shocking just thinking about like how everybody was so excited about Denver going into the season. Even just thinking about that game on Saturday or Sunday, it was like, all right, like Denver Rams Christmas Day, like going into the year, you probably thought that was going to be a huge game. And then they were both 4-10. And it's like, how did we get here, guys? Like, this is very bizarre.
Yeah. Hey, the Rams showed up ready to ball out on Christmas, but yeah. I want to ask Chad, just because of the comments that he's putting in here about Hackett. Now, do you not even like him from like an offensive coordinator standpoint, or do you just think he wasn't cut out to be a coach, or do you think that he's like a fraud of a coordinator too and was just carried by Aaron Rodgers, obviously getting him that job with Denver? Curious about that. But we can keep going until he answers.
Yeah, we got time. All right, so those were the 2 big ones for week 16. Let's transition over to Tinder. Wow, it doesn't even like him as a towel boy. That's pretty tough. So, so if you haven't watched the show before, this is Fantasy Football Tinder. Each week we find 3 profiles that we're going to swipe left or swipe right on. So what you'll see on the screen as we pop it up here is we have our little Tinder board. It's going to get superseded on Zach's face there. So that's pretty cool. And then if we like what we're seeing, if we're going to continue to wanting to show interest in this player, see what we have for this week, we're going to swipe right, which you'll see with the green heart. And if we're not really feeling the vibes that they're putting out, we want to swipe left, find some other options. We are going to swipe left, which you'll see with the red X. So our first profile that we're going to look at is Cam Akers. We talked a little bit about him at the beginning of the show, but this past week he had 23 carries, 118 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 receptions, 29 receiving yards. He's been on quite the tear lately. So how are you feeling about those LA Showtime Akers going into championship week?
I like that. That's a good one.
Yeah, baby.
I mean, I mentioned him a little bit previously when we were talking about like a suitable replacement if you can find one for Derrick Henry. I like Akers as like an RB2 this week. I mean, I like the matchup going against the Chargers, who have given up the 8th most points on the season. I know that that's not necessarily what is it like the last 3 weeks though?
Yeah, it's crazy because the Chargers like woke up and remembered that they have like all these good defensive pieces all of a sudden out of nowhere.
I know they've been.
They are
the injuries are obviously always a thing with them.
But, for sure. They're only giving up 15.4 points per game in full PPR in the last 3 weeks, which puts them as the 4th toughest matchup on paper. But as we saw last week, Donta Foreman did not care about any of that, sitting on my bench, putting up a nice 24 piece. I think the volume side of it, like it's kind of hard to leave him on the bench at this point. He played 100% of the snaps in the first 3 drives, and he never really plays on like third downs and is even getting the third down work. You look at all the injuries, like we said, to the receiving room, all they really have left for like professionals on this team is like Tutu Atwell, which is like meh. You have Tyler Higbee, who's like having like another 2 touchdown game this past week. So like they don't really have anywhere else to go. And I don't think they want Baker Mayfield really doing too much. They don't want him to be put in situations where he's uncomfortable. He's been on the team for a few weeks now, but just like hand the ball off, take chances when you can, and they're really leaning on the run game. But yeah, I like the matchup too. I think he was apparently available in 30% of ESPN leagues, so you might have been able to snatch him up on waivers, which is shocking to me. But yeah, he could be a potential league winner here.
I think that's the thing too. Is you would have thought going against Denver, not that great of a matchup, but like, volume is going to be king here and carry 147 yards and 3 touchdowns against them. I think it's too hard to ignore. I'm not saying, like RB1, this is a league winner type guy, but I think that you can do a lot worse as your RB2.
Yeah, I mean, 49 snaps to Kyron Williams had 8. Malcolm Brown had 7. Ronnie Rivers had 1. He ran 20 routes, which really isn't normally Cam Akers' game. But he's getting the targets. He's getting the carries. Like, it's not a bad place to be. I mean, Sean McVay, great offensive mind. He's got to find a way to score points, and Akers seems to be finally out of his doghouse. So props for him. I mean, I was like, thought this guy was going to be out of football whenever they were like, all right, like we're just not playing him. He's not even going to dress. Like maybe we'll trade him, but who cares? But yeah, he's balling.
Chad, by the way, being our nice little giving us inside info. I feel like it's kind of, if anybody's ever watched the Pat McAfee show, like this is kind of like the Tone Diggs role here. He's just giving us breaking news from the internet as we do the show. As part of the discussions that took place over the last few days, both sides concluded that it was best Raiders Derek Carr step away the final 2 games to avoid the obvious distractions. He won't practice and will be listed as not injury related for the rest of the season.
It's a pretty good way to get paid over the holidays, man. I'm here for that.
Yeah. So the last pass that he threw as a Raider was intercepted by Cameron Sutton to seal a Steelers victory on Christmas Eve.
Fantastic basket catch, by the way. Let me just say that.
Really good.
All right. So you swiped right on Akers, yeah?
Yeah, I'm swiping right.
All right, cool. I'll swipe right too. All right. Keeping the theme with the running backs. So if we blank out real quick. So we had a very interesting situation to shape out in Tampa Bay this past week. So Leonard Fournette kind of had a resurgence in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers victory. So he paced the team. He had 72 rushing yards, 90 receiving yards, and then ended up winning the game in overtime. So this question is really for the guy who's been getting the start in the last 5 games, Rachaad White. Are you waving the white flag in this championship week?
Oh, that's good. I think that like best case scenario, he's a flex play, but if you're at this point in the season, you probably have a better option to me. It's such a shame because I like Rachaad White so much as a player, but like again, volume is king. Fournette got a ton of it in this game. I'm not sure exactly like what happened, but Fournette did look effective, and it's crazy because he literally tweeted and then deleted said tweet that he's been dealing with a Lisfranc injury. I'm assuming the team probably got in touch with him about it and said delete that tweet, please. But he was listed with a foot injury prior to, but he looked very effective in this game. For a game with very little offense, he was one of the better players on the field. 20 carries, 9 receptions. You mentioned 90 receiving yards, which is a shame from the White side of that because that's kind of like what Rachaad White came into the NFL as. Thought he was going to at least have the receiving role for that team.
Right.
If Leonard Fournette's going to be like the second leading receiver on the team in general, he has the second most receptions on the team season long, not just in this game. That's not a good sign for White, obviously. But, you know, obviously we're dwindling down anyway. So who knows what next year will bring, but at least for the rest of this season, I am waving the white flag on Rachaad.
Oh, man. Yeah, it's interesting. So I was thinking the same thing as you. I'm also going to swipe left on Rachaad White, but it's for a different reason. So if you saw that game, they don't rotate the backs based on like situation. So it's like kind of like how they do it in Cleveland, where it's like, this is a Nick Chubb drive. This is a Kareem Hunt drive. What happened this past week, all the way up until the fourth quarter where they were doing a little more hurry up, trying to mix things up, all of the long drives just happened to be when Fournette was on the field. So it wasn't like they were avoiding using White. It was just like if they're rotating and like Fournette just had like the better drives, then it kind of just like shaped out that way. And I think that they're going to continue to do that. What I will say, though, is that this offense, like for all the weapons that they have on paper, the lack of offensive line that they have on that is absolutely crippling this offense. Like the fact that they only put up 19 this past week, like it was astonishing. And Brady looked terrible last week until
Future
he
Steelers
like,
OC, Byron Leftwich.
Oh, I think it's a future Steelers OC, Tom Brady. But no, please don't hire Leftwich. He's about as creative as the 2 crayons they give you at Eaton Park. But yeah, it's just like he up until that final drive, like he didn't look great at all. Carolina, they got absolutely throttled last week against the Lions, who have been stout. But I think Carolina's going to hold them. It's going to be a low scoring game. Both I feel like not great about. So I would be swiping left on the whole backfield just because that offense is in such a lull. So yeah, wave that flag, baby. All right. So third and final profile, I think this one hurt a lot of the fantasy football community as well. But our next profile here is Justin Herbert. So he burnt a lot of people last week with his performance. So if we're looking at his stats, he finished with 235 yards. He had 5 rushing attempts for 1 yard, finished with like about 7 fantasy points. He had a pretty solid matchup on paper against Indianapolis, but if you're looking at his performances, he hasn't really done anything that's been like to what he was being drafted as since week 12. So he's had back-to-back. Last week, he was quarterback number 30. The week before against Tennessee, he was quarterback 25. So going against the Rams this week, how are you feeling? I know we both still had him in the top 10, but I don't know if that was just out of like necessity. He's like the ECR rankings on Fantasy Pros. They have him at 6. The much better rankings from around the 412 Fantasy Football. We had him at 8. But yeah, I'm what do you think about him?
Hey, I bet you we're going to be closer to where he finishes. Yeah, I mean, name and potential are going to obviously carry him. Plus, there actually is like a lot of the top quarterbacks do have tougher matchups this week when I was looking at it. So, but yeah, Justin Herbert, I think he's just playing better real life football than fantasy football. Like he has 1 or none touchdowns in 4 straight weeks at this point.
Do you think that's because of the do you think that's because of the rib injury? Like they don't want him holding the ball, like because it's like I thought that like it's been long enough that would be healed, but
yeah, it's a lot of dink and dunk, which is kind of wild because you know you have a field stretcher and Mike Williams and like the technician and Keenan Allen, but they're really not utilizing that stretching down the field of Mike Williams to open up anything. So I don't know. I mean, maybe that he is a little bit limited physically, and that's why the offense has looked the way that it has. I mean, they won that game. They're in the playoffs and everything like that. But Justin
Right.
Herbert, from a fantasy standpoint, just hasn't provided that value. In the Rams, they've only given up 2 passing touchdowns over the last 3 weeks total. So
13.9 points in the last 3 weeks. So it's tough out there.
So I'm gonna say, I know I still ranked him relatively high. I think he snaps out of it a little bit. Like, I think he throws multiple touchdowns this week. I think he has like a borderline top 10 finish. So I guess I will. What am I doing on this then? If I think he kind of breaks that streak,
I would say swipe right on it. You're willing to give it another chance at love. I realized that I never actually uploaded the swipe right for him, so I'm trying to do that now. There it is. Tinder glitched a little bit there. For me, I think it's tricky because, like, if we're thinking about like options that may be on the waiver wire, maybe somebody like Mike White. Maybe I don't think Jared Goff is going to be on the waivers, but I really like his matchup this week. I think for me, like, it is frustrating to see those kind of flop performances in the playoffs. And they could have a lot of negative impacts. But yeah, I'm still going to ride with them. I'm going to swipe right as well. Like you said, it's not like he's playing bad football. It's just, it's not translating into fantasy points. I think that you can get cute and overthink it. I did that last week playing Davis Mills over Jared Goff because of matchups. And I lost by 4 points in a dynasty league that I probably should have won. But such is life, and you can get too cute with it. And I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, there's a lot of luck involved in winning fantasy. If you're in the championship, you got to ride your dogs out to the finish and hope that, he hasn't had the numbers in the last couple of weeks, but he's one of those guys that can turn it on any given Sunday.
Yeah, and I do want to say, obviously the Rams defense, they've held quarterbacks back a little bit, but 2 of those 3 games, Raiders and Broncos. So Packers sandwich in between.
Good deal. All right, so mixed bag on the Tinder game. Totally fine. We're classy gents like that. So now to get a little bit less classy, we're going to transition to our only fantasy segment of the show. And in this segment, we select one profile or one player for the week. So that we are going to say, all right, this is my guy. He's going to kill it, and he's going to bring home the championship trophy for me. So usually start with our boy Drew. He's on bye this week. I guess that makes you the de facto OnlyFans 1 because you had a better performance than me. So I'll let you start it off.
Hey, Chad, I can't pick Nico Collins, who's on IR at this point. So unfortunate. Tough. But last week I had Najee Harris finish as RB13 with 15.5. He had 16 carries on the ground for 53 yards. But PPR formats, he was able to save his day, added 6 receptions for 42 yards there. Hey, he gets in the end zone. That's a top 10 finish. Obviously, if ifs and buts were candy and nuts, we would have all had a merrier Christmas. But Najee Harris, not a bad performance, but not obviously the performance that I expected, honoring Franco Harris with the weather conditions the way they were. I would not have anticipated Kenny Pickett throwing 39 times in that football game, but here we are. Kind of a mid pick by me. I am going for a home run this week. Dalton Schultz, the Cowboys tight end, is my pick. He hasn't necessarily put together a performance this season that would warrant this, other than maybe his 2 touchdown performance against the Giants. He's only scored 3 touchdowns this season. All 3 of those came in the month of November. Like I said, 2 touchdown game against the Giants on November 24th. He also had one on November 13th. But the Titans are giving up 23.2 points per game to tight ends over the last 3 weeks. They're also 31st on the season in total in terms of passing yards per game. 6th most on the year to tight ends. They are 2nd worst versus the pass. Like I said, he's approaching a 50 reception, 500-yard season, despite the way he started out the season with the injuries, obviously all the mouths to feed in Dallas. This is kind of just, to me throwing a shot in the dark on a great matchup and a player that I really like coming into the season and said would be a top 5 player at the position. So
yeah, I think that the injuries in the middle of the season really wrecked that. But the potential is definitely there. It'll be interesting. Did they already sign him to an extension, or is he like a candidate to be?
No. He's looking for a new deal.
Okay, so he's potentially somebody that could get like a franchise tag kind of situation potentially.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. All right, well, let's get the immaculate Dalton Schultz hair off the screen. Goals. All right. So last week I had selected Darius Slayton. He had 6 targets, 4 receptions, 79 yards. I was really disappointed, honestly, because what I wanted to happen was great. It just happened to the wrong player. Isaiah Hodgins had 8 receptions, 89 yards, and a TD. Never even heard of the guy in my life. And then comes out and does me dirty like that. But Slayton played fine. We'll take it. Double-digit points, but like wide receiver 30. So is what it is. I had him ranked like wide receiver 15. In the spirit of going for all of the marbles here, my selection this week is going to be Tyler Algier. So in the last 2 weeks, he's really picked up his game. So week 15 against New Orleans, who I consider to be a pretty good run defense, 17 carries, 139 yards. And then he also had that touchdown. He was running back 8 in PPR. This past week against Baltimore, 18 carries, 74 yards. He also had 4 receptions, 43 yards. He was wide receiver. I don't know. My brain is just not here. Running back 12 with 16 fantasy points. If we're looking at the matchup this week for Algier, let me pull up the chart real quick. So they have a good matchup on paper. Arizona, they're giving up 35.6 points per game in the last 3 weeks. We saw what Leonard Fournette did the week before. Latavius Murray had a pretty good game. And then Ramondre Stevenson played pretty solid the week prior to that. So I really like that matchup, especially because Arizona's been a little bit more stout on the passing game. And I think, too, just thinking about the dynamic that they have in Atlanta right now with the new quarterback, I don't think Desmond Ritter's really been all that impressive. They've even thrown Felipe Franks in there from time to time. So they're going to be leaning heavily on the ground game. I think he's going to get a lot of work. And I think he's going to find the end zone. So should be a good matchup. And I have him as a high-end running back too this week.
Yeah, if there's one thing that Atlanta's been able to do this year, it's been run the ball. And, you know, obviously, Cordero Patterson, I don't think he's necessarily looked as effective coming back from that knee issue. Sure. And the other running back they had who looked pretty good, Huntley, he got hurt and is out for the rest of the year, was put on IR. So, I think Algier, big beneficiary there. He finished right around Najee last week. So I saw his name. And I like his matchup this week, so I can definitely get on board with that. While we don't have a DFS for you this week without Drew, I will say, hey, Tyler Algier, maybe some of these other guys that we talked about through Only Fantasy and Tinder, maybe you throw them in your lineups.
Maybe for sure.
Lineup that way.
Yeah, I think if just looking at some like juicy matchups that you have this week, like I said, Jared Goff having a final home game of the year. He's been balling out. He's somebody I've picked for Only Fantasy multiple times. Has the 3rd best matchup on paper against Chicago. They've been very porous, especially since they traded Roquan Smith. That defense has kind of fallen apart. Who did they play last week? Do you recall?
Detroit?
No, Chicago.
Bills.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So Cook he had a 20, 30-yard rushing touchdown, and they were saying on Twitter that like in flag football that still would have been a touchdown because the front seven was just just rough. A couple other options at the quarterback position. If you wanted to get really desperate, Mac Jones has a decent matchup against Miami, but I don't know if I'd feel too confident in that. From the running back perspective, we already mentioned Algier. Saquon's probably going to be a popular pick for DFS lineups this week. Indianapolis has been pretty tough against the ground. Travis Etienne has a good matchup against Houston. And then Jerick McKinnon is looking to be like a huge league winner. I mean, Denver giving up 34.6 points in the last 3 weeks. And the way that they're just utilizing him in the red zone, like it's just pretty magical to watch. Someone who may not be on the radar as much, who I think is going to have a good week, Donta Foreman. I think he's going to follow it up with another strong week, a little bit better matchup on paper. Mm-hmm. Looking at the receivers, it's a shame. If Tannehill was playing, I might have picked Treylon Burks for my only fantasy this week. 54.2 points against Dallas. The Giants, again, have another solid matchup, so maybe you can dart throw it with one of the Giants receivers again. But I think that a lot of the good teams, they're playing tough games this week. So it's going to be interesting to see how, from a fantasy perspective, how that output is going to match up. Other than that, defenses.
I'll tell you, there's a receiver that I kind of like, Drake London. At least 6 receptions and 70 yards in 3 straight weeks. 2 of those weeks were with Desmond Ridder. So
yeah, he's had a very good bookend season. So like he started off hot the first 3 weeks of the season, kind of disappeared in the middle. Then he's had a strong finish to the year. Chad is saying to watch out because Miami torments New England. So that's also fair. And I think that they are in Miami. Yeah. Or no, it's a home game, so it's in New England.
Perryman and Chandler Jones on IR, to Chad's point, if you're looking at like a Brock Purdy for DFS too.
Yeah. And then from like a defensive perspective, really liking Kansas City this week against Denver. Denver's been giving up a lot of points. So if you can go with that, you can. I know I picked them up on waivers in a league that I'm in the championship for. And then Mason, or is it Mason Crosby? Yeah, kicker for Green Bay.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So Minnesota's giving up over 12 points per game pretty much all season against kickers. So anybody against Minnesota that's kicking the ball, put up some points. So he's also
probably like
available.
It seemed like you were torn on saying Mason Cole or Sidney Crosby.
It was really hard for me, honestly. But it is what it is. But yeah, so definitely some good options out there. It should be a fun week. So if you're in the championship, honestly, best of luck getting this far as an accomplishment. Hopefully you're able to get it over the line. I've got 2 title belts that I'm looking to get, a couple of third place ribbons as well. But yeah, I just want to say thanks to everybody for tuning in for this season. We'll be doing a recap and help people out that are on that week 18 grind because they just can't get enough. But yeah, very thankful. It's been a fun year. So really thankful for it.
Yeah, been a blast. Everybody that's tuned in. I mean, Chad, one of the biggest supporters that we got in the YouTube. But everybody that watches on YouTube live or watches it back or listens to the show on any of the various platforms you can get it from, we can't thank you enough for making us one of your places to get some fantasy advice, just have conversations. Maybe you don't take a single piece of advice away from what we say, but just being a part of it and chiming in, giving your opinion on what we say, we appreciate it. So other than that, I do want to mention the GoFundMe that will be linked in the description of this, wherever you're watching or listening, for the 2-year-old daughter of one of my friends who tragically passed away in October of this year. Her name is Isla, and there's a GoFundMe that was created to go towards her future. Right around $34,000 has been raised in the couple months that's been going. It's going to stay open for a long time, and I'm going to keep talking about it on here. So the link to that GoFundMe will be in the description of this. If you can help out. If you can share it. So thank you everybody that's been a part of that already or in the future will be a part of it. In advance, I'm thanking you. So Chad, one last comment he had to get in here. First off, have a great new year. Can one of you head over to PPG Paints Arena and tell Brian Russ to stop costing me money? What is Brian Russ doing to cost you money? What do you?
I don't know. I'm going to play bingo tonight, so I actually can't help you. But I was thinking about going to the game. But
don't want to plug here, but like Brian Rust is somebody that has been on around the 412, not the fantasy show, obviously, but the regular show. So
maybe we could get him.
If you really want me to tell him that, I could tell him that.
B. Russ, we need you for the recap.
But other than that, like Joe said, thank you everybody that's been a part of this season. It's been a lot of fun. You got one more week with us to go over recap, obviously, the season up to this point for people like Chad that are playing in week 18 for whatever reason. So we'll be back next week. Hopefully with Drew, and again, send your thoughts and prayers him and his wife Zayna's way. If you are somebody that does pray, if not, just your well wishes and thoughts. But until next week, for Smitty, for Drew, I almost said Drew right there. For Smitty and Joe, we'll talk to you next week, and bye-bye.